you are in the rock and roll center, the heartland of the multipolar world.
You bet.
You have just attended the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Maybe we can start here and talk about some of the developments that you are paying attention to when it comes, especially to Russia's role in building and strengthening the emerging multipolar world. And of course, we can talk also about many other developments from the BRICS ministers meeting, foreign ministers meeting, and much more. But how about we just begin with the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum? How did Russia, how was the global majority, China, as the two big Russian-China centers and nodes of the multipolar world? How did it all shake up, and what can you tell us?
It was very impressive. Very, very impressive. I spent nearly the whole week last week in St. Petersburg. There were over 21,000 people at the forum. You had human traffic jams at rush hour, especially in the morning, around lunchtime, and in the early evening. 139 nations represented. So not a microcosm, a macrocosm of the whole global south, of the global majority. And we worked like hell. The big day of the summit, which was on Thursday, June 6th, like in the morning, you had some of the best sessions, and they were all at the same time, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12, some at 3, and you had to run from one room to another to catch the most important ones. The best thing about the summit, it's some of the best sessions, you really have to be there in the room. And then afterwards, you manage to talk on the sidelines to some people that some of them are very, very hard to find and very hard to meet. Some Russian ministers, for instance, Chinese academics, businessmen from the Persian Gulf, the governor of Murmansk region, for instance. It's absolutely priceless, not only to see these people talking, but to talk to them afterwards. And most people are extremely accessible. So I wrote a column published on this Monday on Sputnik, as concisely as I could, because it was really a tsunami of information, listing the 3 key messages that came from St. Petersburg, not only to Russia, but to Eurasia and to the global majority as a whole, including people in the global north who care to listen and to pay attention. So these 3 messages are intertwined. They're very, very serious, because it's like in the year of the Russian presidency of BRICS, this essentially economic forum had to have a message that would resonate all across the global majority. And this is exactly what happened. If you took Putin's speech at the plenary session, that was on Friday afternoon, lasted 1 hour. It was obviously, as usual, crammed with data, facts, numbers, economic analysis, and projections. For instance, he listed no less than 9 strategic areas where the Russian economy can keep improving. So Russia now, in terms of economic planning, is doing the equivalent of the Chinese 5-year plans. In fact, China has already they have 5-year plans in a row, and they already planned everything up to 2035, when the West cannot plan what's going to happen next week. So that's how it works. And Putin outlined all that. It was a 1-hour address, extremely concise, but packed with information. And then when you combine with the meeting that Putin had with President Dilma, president of the NDB, the BRICS Bank, Dilma was extremely well received in St. Petersburg. And then later, when Putin spoke at the plenary session, she was in the front row. The most important guests are always in the front row in the plenary session. And of course, something that was very important for a very dear friend of mine in Shanghai and myself, because we helped broker this meeting. This was a private meeting on Friday, the key day of the forum before Putin's plenary session, at 10 in the morning in a private room in the Expo Center, between President Dilma, representing the NDB, the BRICS Bank, and Sergei Glaziev. Glaziev is the Ministry of Macroeconomy of the Eurasian Economic Union. And he already academically approved the new concept called the unit, which was devised by 2 Russians and 1 Chinese. This is a story that I have been following here in Moscow for 1 year. I had a lot of meetings and dinners with them. They explained the unit in detail. And then when they thought it was the right time, I did the first, let's say, international column article analysis presenting the unit to public opinion. That was published less than a month ago, in fact. And very, very important, Glaziev explained to Dilma face to face everything about the unit and what would it mean in practical terms to have a new, unit of trade commerce based on gold and currencies of the BRICS nations, apolitical, that can be used by individuals, by corporations, by governments, by companies, especially. And at the end, it was great. But it was they were supposed to meet for half an hour. This thing went over for over 1 hour, in fact. And at the end, both were very, very happy. President Dilma was beaming, in fact. I never saw her so relaxed in a very, very tense setting like this. Glaziev was very, very, very pleased with the meeting as well. And very important, they also more or less, though, in fact, they actually said it discreetly that they had discussed this with Putin in the previous day when Putin met with Dilma. So Putin, can you imagine, Putin and the president of the NDB are already discussing the unit face to face. This is mega game changing, because they also decided in their meeting before Dilma met Glaziev that there's going to be a seminar on the unit at the New Development Bank in Shanghai in September. Why this is so important? Because this could pave the way for the unit to be on the table in the BRICS summit here in Kazan in October. So they have a few weeks to discuss that in Shanghai, to circulate that with other members of the NDB, to circulate back to the 10 BRICS, and then this will be on the table in October. If that happens, Danny and all of you, this would be mega, because it's the only game in town. There are no other practical, solid propositions for cross-border trade bypassing the dollar and the euro. This is the only one. Of course, it needs to be tweaked, streamlined, perfected, etc. And the conceptualizers admit it. Tomorrow night, for instance, I'm going to have another dinner with them to talk about what happened in St. Petersburg and tell them what happened. And they say, okay, so what do you plan to do next? And they want to have input from, let's say, top-of-the-line economists. Michael Hudson, our friend Michael Hudson, is one of them. Zoltan Poznar, for instance. So this is the ball is rolling already, and this was one of the most important messages out of St. Petersburg. So, Danny, before I go for another 10 hours, okay, another 2 minutes. So the third message, clinch this our first the BRICS themselves. The fact that most of the sessions were related to BRICS one way or another. If they were not talking about specific aspects of BRICS, they were talking about connectivity of BRICS with other multilateral organizations and projects. Example, the Eurasia Economic Union, the International North-South Transportation Corridor, Greater Eurasia Partnership, which is the Russian framework for Eurasia integration, the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, relationship with Persian Gulf, with Latin America, with Africa, etc. So this is very, very important. And between Thursday and Friday at the forum, we had definitive confirmation that 59 countries have already applied to become members of BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and Eurasia Economic Union. So there you go. You know, this is a high-speed rail train that has already left the station, you know, zooming out. And guess who's being left behind? That place with a small garden and high walls. And this is not my definition. This definition comes from Eric Lee. Eric Lee is a mega Hong Kong, Shanghai entrepreneur, very famous, extremely popular all across East Asia. He was there at the forum. In fact, he was at our own session. Our session was Philosophy and Multipolarity. Eric Lee was there with us. And then later on at the dinner, he continued to talk about his formulation, which is brilliant, for especially the European Union. A small garden within high walls. So these people are being left behind. And the high-speed rail train is all these multilateral organizations working towards multipolarity. Another notion that is emerging that we should start using from now on, a multinodal world, because this is a new system of international relations with nodes. And in fact, in the Sputnik thing, I think I wrote multinodal and they put it multimodal. No, the original concept is exactly. I am.
I just noticed that myself, actually. Multinodal, not multimodal.
Danny, I just noticed because you put it on screen, and I had written multinodal, and somehow they changed it. I'm not sure
editor.
They got the idea. Multinodal
okay.
In terms of various nodes. We discussed this a lot among us in St. Petersburg. And also a very, very important concept, a polycentric world. There was a round table on Saturday morning. Maria Zakharova was also on this one. She was on our panel, and she also was on this panel on polycentricity. Excellent concept as well to define what's happening right now. And Putin, his last sentence at the end of his speech was fascinating. He said, Russia is becoming the capital of a multipolar, harmonic world. And this is expressed, as we speak, practically a few minutes before our talk, in Nizhny Novgorod, a few minutes ago, in fact, by Lavrov, at the end of the meeting of the foreign ministers of BRICS. Lavrov, basically what he was saying is that, look, we are trying to strive towards an harmonic system of international relations, echoing what Putin had said last week, right? So we have all these. This new terminology is important because we should start using it, all of us independents, to define this high speed rail process that is now full tilt towards a multipolar, multinodal, polycentric, harmonic system of international relations and trade and commerce. So, okay, Danny, this is the short intro. Let's put it this way.
No, incredible overview of what was such an important event. And maybe you could speak more on, because this, Putin during his speech at the forum, right. His address was just full of very powerful messages, especially, I believe, not just to the global majority, but to those adversaries or enemy states, as they're now calling them, listening from the outside. For
Yes.
example, saying that, the global majority needs to dump toxic currencies, definitely talking about the US dollar. And also, this multipolar harmonic world is a nod to China's, not just its ancient civilization of thousands of years, 5,000 plus years, but to its current as well political philosophy, where China is now calling itself a civilizational state. It is not using the term nation state. It is using the words harmony and Confucius kind of philosophy to describe its overall principles, both domestically and foreign policy. So could you talk about how this, because when we talk about the Russia-China partnership, we're often talking about trade, we're often talking about very concrete economic terms, but talk about how the forum represents what is, given that they are the epicenter, both Russia and China, the epicenter of the multipolar world, represents almost like a symbiotic kind of relationship forming where these two countries are operating in a way that goes far beyond economics.
Absolutely. And the fact that Putin start to use the term harmonic tells us that the level of conversation between him and Xi Jinping is on the level of civilization states and philosophies of government and philosophy of history. This is very, very serious, way beyond geoeconomics, geopolitics, and trying to change the international finance and trade system. We in our panel, philosophy and multipolarity, was interesting because we had different points of view from India, from West Asia, from China, from Russia. And it was a sort of indirect dialogue where we were also discussing essentially how to frame all this in terms of philosophy of civilization states as well, because it's a completely different universe compared to the monochromatic and unilateral Western view of history post Enlightenment, based on systems that were elaborated in the West all the time. The concept of liberal democracy that was totally perverted, neoliberalism as it was codified this past 20 years, 25, 30 years. And these new these new protagonists as civilization states, Russia, China, Iran, to a lesser extent, India. India is a very complicated case because of those internal problems of people surrounding Modi, the anti-Muslim prejudice, the caste system, the social inequalities inside India. Of course, we still have all that weight of Indian civilization, culture, religion, ways of living, which is very, very important, but not as important in terms of determining how the multipolar, multinodal world is advancing. So it's essentially, let's say, on the top, Russia and China, and there is a lot of input, of course, from different different lands of Islam. Not as much from the Arab world yet. There is an input from Shiite Israel, Iran, of course, but Russia and China is the key. So this is Russian philosophy, of course, Eurasianism, but not Eurasianism like the 1920s. Eurasianism reinterpreted as applying to different nodes across Eurasia, and of course, a very serious input from Confucianism and Taoism from China. This is a conversation that I had, for instance, with Professor Zhang Weiwei from Fudan University on the sidelines. He was also on our panel. And the debate about the Greater Eurasia Partnership was fascinating because it was also a philosophical debate. They were discussing an overall concept for Asia, which, by the way, it came via Putin in 2016. Putin was the first who actually launched the idea. And Sergei Karaganov, who actually interviewed Putin last Friday at the Q&A after Putin's address, he was the guy who coordinated the whole thing and, let's say, launched the idea. So this is the overall idea for Eurasian integration from a Russian point of view, which blends in with the Belt and Road Initiative. I call it New Silk Roads for 10 years. I think it's a more people-friendly definition. It's also a philosophical idea. It's a geoeconomic idea, it's a geopolitical idea, but it's also a philosophical idea based on Chinese ancient history and Eurasia-wide ancient history. The Persians, the Ottomans, the Parthians, everybody who was a middleman inside the ancient Silk Roads, all the way to the Venetians. If you talk about it, they totally understand. So we are seeing something extraordinary, which is a interconnection and melding of philosophical, anthropological, sociological, geoeconomic, and geopolitical factors. That's what makes some of these panels in St. Petersburg so fascinating, because they were not talking only about connectivity corridors or let's build a transport corridor going from Moscow across the Caspian all the way to... No, it's way beyond that. And the fact that the self-excluded small garden within high walls is not part of the conversation is absolutely appalling. For instance, in one of the panels, I think it was on the Greater Eurasia panel, Karin Neisel, former Austrian foreign minister, she was on the table. She was more or less, let's say, representing Europe, but a Europe that doesn't exist anymore. Karin is a very culture-educated woman, an old-school European, which are, of course, disappearing completely because the representation of Europe nowadays are those clowns in Brussels. And, of course, the other clowns in the capitals of Western Europe, especially, not to mention Baltic Chihuahuas, rabbit Poles, and all these people, So the heritage, the fantastic heritage of European culture is being completely sidelined by these people who claim they are representing Europe and European culture nowadays. Lorenzo Pacini, a professor, was on our table as well. He was talking about the power of Italian culture over centuries, forging the European identity. This is being completely sidelined as well. The best Italian intellectuals nowadays, they simply cannot appear on mainstream media, on TV, on the big newspapers. They have been completely sidelined. So at least they find their audience in the independent channels. But the problem is the way this usurpation process by Brussels of what stands for Europe. The Europe, between commas, that they propose or try to, in fact, impose across Europe doesn't exist, is a fiction, and it's a toxic fiction. It's much, much worse,
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.